I was very upset about being accused of lying. I think that
Yes.
if you say that, I had a different views, and I thought it was very hypocritical of the senators, especially Senator Warren, to essentially bully me because I had a different view.
If you'd like to earn CPE credit for listening to this episode, visit earmarkcpe.com. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Continuing education has never been so easy. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Earmark. I'm Blake Oliver. I'm talking today with Christina Ho, a board member at the PCAOB, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. Christina, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's say that you and I met at a cocktail party in DC, and I'm not an auditor, I'm not an accountant, I don't know anything about the accounting profession, and I ask what you do. And you tell me, I'm a board member at the PCAOB. And I say, well, what's that? How would you describe the PCAOB to someone who is not familiar with it?
Well, great question. But before I answer, I want to give my standard disclaimer first. The views I express here are my own. They do not necessarily represent the views of the PCAOB board, other board member, or staff. So I would say to you that the PCAOB is responsible for making sure auditors who check the publicly traded companies' financial disclosures are doing their job well.
How does the PCAOB measure that? How do you know if the auditors are doing their job?
Yes, PCAOB has a investor protection mission, and which is carried out through certain program by registering the audit firms who can do public company audits, and then we do inspection. By doing inspection, I mean that we check periodically, depending on the size of the firms, how they did with their audits. And then we also have an enforcement program. If we find that audit firms has committed fraud or violated our standard or rules, we can sanction them. And the way that we find out whether they are doing their job well, primarily through inspection. The inspection program actually has the majority of the staff in that program, and we inspect firms' audits some on an annual basis, some on every 3-year basis. And based on the result of that, we determine whether they are doing their job well or not.
Okay, got it. So the PCAOB inspects the audits of firms that are registered with the PCAOB.
Yes.
And if you are auditing public companies listed on stock exchanges in the United States, then you have to be registered with the PCAOB, right?
Yes.
Okay. And how does that work exactly? How does the PCAOB decide what audits to inspect, what audits to audit? Because I understand it's not every audit that gets inspected, right?
Yes. So we take the way that we take a sample. So auditors always pick sample because we can't inspect every single audit. We take a sample and then we inspect based on certain areas. We also don't inspect for every audit. We don't inspect every single area. We take a risk-based approach. Certain audits we select based on a random basis, but a majority of them we select on a risk-based basis.
Okay, great. So I, as an audit firm, I do, let's say, 100 audits, and then the PCAOB decides out of those 100, we're going to inspect X number of audits. About what percentage is it that get inspected?
Yes, so it's different so there are 3 sort of category. The one category is what we call the global network firms. They are the big six. So the big four plus Grant Thornton and BDO, they're the largest firms. We select them in terms of the number for the big four, it's like about 50 plus or minus, each year. And then BDO and Grant Thornton are less than that because they have less clients. Because if you think about it, the majority, all of the S&P 500 and, the large accelerated issuers are all mostly audited by Big Four. And then the next category is what we call the annual firms. They are firms that have more than 100 issuer. They get inspected annually as well. And that percentage is about 10%. I personally think that our inspection program is disproportionately burdensome on these firms. And they are smaller, but if you think about it, their audit partners actually get inspected a lot more frequently, given the percentage we focus on. That's why I have heard feedback from many of those firms that they are trying to, especially if you're like a little bit more than 100, they actually are trying to like get rid of their audit clients to get under 100. So the third category is any firms with less than 100 issuer, and they get inspected every 3 years.
So that's a big difference going from annual inspections to triannual or
Yes,
triennial. I think that's the word.
yes,
A lot less work.
yes,
So the firms that get inspected annually that are smaller than the big six, the big four plus BDO and Grant Thornton, you said it's about 10%. And I believe you said that for the largest firms, those top six, it's about 50 audits each that get inspected. What is
yes.
that? What does that work out to as a percentage of the audits that they do? Is that around 10%? Is it more? Is it less?
No, it's less
It's
because,
less.
if they have, let's, assume that they have, if we have, there's like 4,000, well, maybe 5,000 public companies now, and let's say, about 2,000 of them are large. And so if you think about among the big four, there are like threshold is probably less than 10%. I don't know the exact
Mm,
number, but in my head, and it depends on which firms. I think they get probably from a percentage wise, they get audit inspected less. Plus, you think about how much resources they have in terms
yeah,
of national office and all that kind of stuff. That's why I think it's disproportionately burdensome on the um, you know, annually
right.
inspect firms.
Yeah, that seems unfair that the largest firms would have fewer inspections as a percentage of their audits than firms that are smaller than them.
Yes, I think that I mean these are all the things I've been hearing, as part of my engagement with especially smaller firms. I'm learning more about the impact to them, and also more importantly, the impact to the capital market ecosystem as a whole. I personally, I just don't think it's good for a very important part of an ecosystem to try to not grow. That doesn't sound like a good thing to me, especially if we are trying to, really like facilitate capital formation. We want our capital markets to grow. We need to make sure we have resilience in the audit marketplace to make sure that we have enough supplier to support, especially the smaller issuers. Because they are not the big four is not going to audit those clients.
Right. So your view is that the burden on the small audit firms is too high.
Yeah, I think it's disproportionately too high on those smaller firms.
And that burden is causing them to either stop doing audits or to shrink the number of audits they do in order to be inspected less often.
Yes, exactly. And I also think because of the challenge of the human capital, because the smaller firms from a competitiveness wise, for human capital and also investment in technology, they just don't have the same resources. So they are already sort of on a disadvantage. And if they are actually have more burden from a regulator perspective, it's just gonna make them even, they have more work and harder to attract talents.
One argument in favor of keeping that burden or keeping the current system in place is that it improves audit quality. And I'd love to talk to you about your views on the state of audit quality today. How are we doing as a profession? What is the state of audit quality? Are we doing good audits? Are we doing bad audits? If it's a mix, how many are good and how many are bad? How do you look at it?
Yes, it depends on what data you look at. So if you look at the data on number of restatement and you look at the last 10, 20 years, and we are from a number of restatement perspective, one would say, the state of audit quality is good because we are um, restatement has been on decline in the past 10 years. If you look at the AICPA CAQ study that they released last year, and also I talk to audit committees and on a regular basis. If I talk to them, they feel that the audit quality has been improving, and also so is the quality of the financial reporting. If you look at our deficiency rate as a metrics on audit quality, you would think that the sky is falling and that the audit quality is really bad. So, in my opinion, I believe that the audit quality is very nuanced, and I think that restatement metric is a much better metrics that measure audit quality because that really measure the true impact to investors. The reason I don't believe that our deficiency rate is the best measurement, it's one measurement, but it's not the best measurement of audit quality, is because one, our deficiencies and I have been saying this publicly, we do not have any severity rate on our deficiency rate, our deficiency. We put everything in the same bucket. And in reality, not everything is the same in terms of impact and materiality. So, what matters to investors is really restatement. That matters to them the most. And this is from, I also talk to the investors, including institutional investors, traders, analysts, and they focus on restatement. So I think the answer is a more nuanced than like just, one thing. Um, the our
Can we,
deficient,
sorry,
sorry,
can we dig into those numbers a bit?
sure,
I'd love to understand how you square those,
yes,
because I have been watching the PCAOB press releases. The deficiency rate in particular got a lot of attention last year, and it is very high. It looks high. 46% of audits, almost half of audits reviewed in the 2023 inspection cycle, contained at least one significant deficiency, and that's up from 40% in 2022. And that rose from 34% in 2021 and 29% in 2020. So we went from 29% deficiencies, a 29% deficiency rate in 2020 to a 46% deficiency rate in 2023. And according to the PCAOB's own definition, the deficiencies in these audits are so severe that, quote, the audit firm had not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence to support its opinion, unquote. So when I read that, that to me sounds like the auditor should not have issued the opinion. And it sounds like the auditor should not have issued the opinion in close to half of the audits that were inspected. Help me understand this.
Yes. So I have spoken on that. In fact, I have been accused for downplaying our deficiency, the state of audit quality, by saying this. In fact, I think it's important. The definition you read, that was right, but it's also equally important when you read our disclaimer, which says if we include a Part 1A or Part 1B deficiency in this report, other than those deficiencies for audits with incorrect opinion on the financial statements, it does not necessarily mean that the issuer's financial statements are materially misstated or that undisclosed material weaknesses in ICFR exist. And the percentage of those that are in the category of deficiency for audits with incorrect opinion is like less than 5%. So I think that you can look at the definition, which also said at the time, and then our disclaimer. So in reality, it's very difficult for investor to discern what the impact and materiality of these deficiencies are. And that's what I meant by severity. For the issuer's internal control over financial reporting, they have to evaluate their internal control, and the auditor has to attest to their internal control, but they have to identify whether they are material weakness, significant deficiency, or deficiency. Our inspection report does not provide these severity.
The 5% number you mentioned, that is the percentage of financial statements that are restated as a result of errors?
That
Is
is actually those are the actual audit deficiency that had a incorrect opinion on the financial statements
got
or
it. So there's a difference between the PCAOB deficiency rate, which is 46%, that says there's something wrong with this audit, and then the 5% number, which is the audit opinion was wrong. And that's what I don't understand is like if the PCAOB is saying that the auditor should not have issued the opinion, how can the opinion be right?
Well, I think that here's the thing: when we do these inspection, we provide these comment to the firm, and I think we put that in our inspection report, which have a bunch of disclaimers, including the one I just read. Um, it's possible that the firms might have gone back to double check that the audit deficiency did not actually result in any incorrect opinion. So that's not transparent in our report. So it really is confusing to the investors and the public.
So the firm gets the deficiency. The firm gets a deficiency in their audit, and then the audit firm has to decide, are we going to help the client restate their financials? And it's 5% of the time when they do that. And is that 5% of all the PCAOB inspections?
So if you look at the 2020, the 46% that for the year for 20, so it's 2024, we have 46%. But if you could look through all the inspection report, if that there is a section, it would say deficiency for audits with incorrect opinion. If you look under that heading and count, and then divide it by the total of audits that we inspected, my calculation was less than 5%, which
Okay.
means it's very, very few that were our deficiency that we identify for the audits that they actually resulted in incorrect opinion. So that's how I kind of like look at these two number. That's why I feel like there needs to be more context so that people understand. Because, like you said, if you hear 46%, you think like half of the audits cannot be trusted, and that is not true because the nature of these deficiency it need to be eval looked at carefully, and also how we came up with the 46%. Because when I talked about the earlier about the fact that we took a sample, right?
Hmm.
And if you take a risk-based sample, and because they're not statistical sample, we really can't extrapolate the deficiency rate to the entire population of all the audit because we did not take a statistical sample. So this may mean that if you actually inspected the entire population, the deficiency rate might be lower because if
Mm,
when you
I
do
see.
risk-based approach,
Yes.
meaning you're more likely to identify a deficiency in those samples.
Right. You're looking for audits that are likely to have deficiencies.
Yes.
So that number is kind of useless, isn't it? The 46% number, it doesn't mean, what does it even mean? It doesn't
Yeah,
mean
to
that.
me to me, I actually think the way to look at deficiency rate is not by each year. The best way to look at that data needs to be looking at a trend, and then you look at what caused these changes in the trend. When I first started on the board, I actually, looked at deficiency rate since inception. And I looked at the trend, and I actually did a speech on it last year about, how there were like, you can kind of look at them every 10 years, and they tend to go up and then come down and then go up and come down. There are different events that cause these things to happen. So, like for example, the first like 10 years, the deficiency rate got very high, like in 2010, from 2004, because we that's the first year that we started doing inspection on ICFR because of the AS5 standard. So when PCOB first started, we issued this auditing standard 2 on auditing internal control over financial reporting, which created a big mess because of all the detail and prescriptive things that auditors ask the issuer to do. So several years later, we had to amend that standard to make it more principle based. And then 2010s when we first like really started inspecting ICFR audit. And so you kind of, I saw a trend of going up, and because we're inspecting in a new area. And then if I look at the last, 4 years and the trend of going up, there were multiple things that happened with the COVID, with the remote work, with multiple things, with change on the board, because that leads to potentially different different expectations.
Right.
So I think that the best way to assess, to use that information, because I'm a data person, I don't look at these data just without context. I think it's really important to look at these data in context.
I agree. And it seems like we're missing a lot of that context in what is released by the PCAOB. It seems like if we are going to try to measure audit quality profession wide, then we should have a metric that reliably measures it in a way that is unbiased. So the fact that all these audits are selected on a risk-based approach and not randomly is a problem because we're not getting a clear picture as to what percentage of audits as a whole in the whole population have a deficiency. It would be like if we were auditors and we were going in and picking a population and we were hand picking to try to find the transactions with errors. issues, problems, right? And we weren't randomly selecting, right? So why doesn't the PCAOB have an objective measurement of audit quality, or is there one that is not being published?
I believe that if our goal is to improve audit quality by helping the firm improve, which I believe was the intent of Congress, because it was supposed to be a supervision model where you do inspection and then you help the firm improve, large and small. And then and taking a risk-based approach makes sense because you want to identify the area that had the most risk of deficiency so that you can help the firm improve. What I am critical about is what we have been doing is not to help the firm improve, but by painting a picture of the auditing profession being incompetent, dishonest. That is very unfair. And if you were going to do that, then I agree with you that by using these these deficiency rate as a mean to, pretty much make the audit quality sound, the state of audit quality seem really bad without providing transparent information and context, then yes, I completely agree with you. That is not right. And that is what I have been critical about.
So don't you agree though that it would be helpful to have an objective measure of like audit quality by firm, where a random percentage of a firm's audits are selected for inspection and then they are rated for quality. And that way, investors, management can look at a firm and say, well, your ranking is 80%, and this other firm is 60%, and this other firm is 50%. Right now, we kind of have that a little bit, but it's not objective. It's not fair because the audits are not randomly selected. We have some firms that have 100% deficiency rates, right? Every audit that is inspected is deficient. There's actually quite a few on the PCAOB website, and that looks terrible. But I guess it doesn't seem to matter to anyone. Investors don't seem to care. Like,
Well, I
shouldn't
feel
we have
like,
some sort of shouldn't we have some sort of way of ranking the quality of the audits done by audit firms?
yes, I think the pat in the historically, actually, the board has tried to. I mean, I think the project audit quality indicator has been around for 15 years or something like that, and I think this board also, as a result of that, tried to propose some firm and engagement metrics, which I dissented on, and I think the measurement of audit quality has been something that people have been trying to do, but I think it's difficult because audit quality is not a easily quantitatively measurable. So I think that has been the struggle. And going back to your comment about the investor, doesn't don't seem to care. I do think investors care, but I also think there are different kind of investors. For the most sophisticated investor, they focus on making investment decision based on the company's disclosure and the performance, and then they make sure that the audit is a clean opinion. So that's like the most important part to them. And they for the most part they trust the process. I think we also have some investor advocate who would say that yes, you need to have the engagement performance metrics and all that kind of stuff. They believe that that will provide an investor informative information. But I also think information, if you have so much out there, I would say the fact that we've been like really flooding the ecosystem or the market with all the information about our inspection results and enforcement, it's hard for investors to decipher what which piece of information truly matter. And I think that's the part we're not doing a good job at. We give them so much information, but often not, with real context. And it just seemed like everything is so bad. Then when you listen to that, it's hard for them to say, okay, I will listen to this part of the information. So I think that we should be more transparent about the context. And I agree that having more information on that really link audit quality is really would be very helpful.
Yeah, that's the way I've always viewed the PCAOB as the auditor of the auditors. The we need a way to measure their performance, and we don't have that. The deficiency rates do not accomplish that, according to what I'm hearing from you right now.
Yes,
It's not an
that
accurate measure. When we see like BDO has like an 80% or more deficiency rate, that doesn't mean that 80% of their audits are bad. It just means that of the ones that the PCAOB inspectors inspected, there was something wrong with it, but that whatever was wrong with it didn't necessarily mean that BDO didn't issue the correct opinion. So that to me is like a useless metric.
I can't say I disagree with you.
um, so let's let's talk about what's going on in politics recently. Department of Government Efficiency has been going around and digging into different federal agencies, organizations, nonprofits, saying, justify your purpose, justify why taxpayers should continue to fund you, and cutting those that can't. Has the PCAOB had any contact with DOJ?
Well, one of the thing you'll hear from people say is that we are not a federal agency because we were technically a nonprofit, even though we were established by Congress. But the Sarbanes-Oxley law specifically say we're not a federal agency. So there are a number of executive order that's related to Department of Government Efficiency that are issued to ask agency head to look at um, efficiency or regulatory burden in coordination with the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, that seems sensible to me, but can we say we are a federal agency? We are not a federal agency. However, I also don't think we can say because of that, we're not impacted because our regulator, which is SEC, is a federal agency. And I expect that they would be already looking, even without the Department of Government Efficiency, would be looking for us to look at efficiency and optimize our workforce because I have said publicly our budget has grown 40% under this board. And that is not sustainable. And so I fully expect that SEC, the new SEC leadership, even without the Department of Government Efficiency, would want us to look for efficiency. With the Department of Government Efficiency lens, I think they will probably want us to do even more of that.
Some have suggested disbanding the PCAOB and rolling its responsibilities back in to the SEC. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say to do that requires Congress to make legislation. You really can't do that without amending Sarbanes-Oxley and amending that, going through the legislative process that could take a long time, and it depends on so many factors. If you ask me on just the merit of that, I can see the merit for doing that, mainly because PCAOB is a regulator that's not um, a federal agency, which means that we're subject to congressional oversight, which means that we are subject to a lot of the federal statutory constraint on regulators. And that's important because regulator has a lot of power. And I believe that unchecked power is dangerous. And to have a non-federal entity to have that much power can be dangerous because based under our bylaw, all the power to run the day-to-day operation, including directing the staff, allocating resources, are vested on the chair. So the chair is like the CEO of the entity, but the chair also runs the board and based on our bylaw. So it's kind of like it's not like in the corporate world where you have the board overseeing management. This one is like the chair has essentially unchecked power that can do anything. It's subject to the SEC's oversight, and but the SEC oversight currently is only limited to our budget and our rulemaking activities, and of course appointing the board. So I believe that there are merits because PCAOB, given our regulatory power, need more accountability. But for that to happen requires Congress to act.
Mm. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. So the chair, Erica Williams, she controls the board. Does not, like you said, in a corporate environment, the board appoints the CEO. It doesn't
Yes.
work that way with the
No.
PCAOB. Interesting. So the PCAOB was established after the collapse of Enron with Sarbanes-Oxley, the goal to create oversight for the audit profession, because the argument was, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on my history here, the argument was that the audit profession had failed to regulate itself in that regard. Is there any evidence that the PCAOB has improved audit quality in the time since it was established?
I believe if you look at the restatement metrics, I think that you can really the implication is that of course it's not all related to PCAOB. I think the PCAOB is a factor in providing that, and I think if you talk to audit committee chairs, you talk to the controllers of S&P 500, I think all of them would say that the state of financial disclosures in terms of quality has improved, and also the state of they feel comfortable with the state of their auditors because they obviously only deal with their auditors. So I think if you look at those different pieces of information, I think it's reasonable to say that PCAOB has helped improve audit quality.
But that's anecdotal. We don't have a way to measure it.
Yes, it's anecdotal, but you can say restatement. That is a quantitative metric. Of course, the restatement is not entirely attributed to just auditor. There are many, many factors. There are many players in the financial reporting ecosystem. So everybody, I think, can take credit for that. And PCAOB is one of them.
So the percentage of financial restatements has decreased?
Yes.
And how much?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but if you look at the CAQ study that was released last year, you can see they did a 10-year look back and study and looking at restatement numbers.
Got it. Okay, so we can say, or you would agree with the statement that the PCAOB has improved audit quality. We just don't know how much.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you can say it's kind of like you can say there's a correlation, but whether there's a causation, we don't.
Right. Right. So this is almost a moot point. Well, it is a moot point. The proposed quality control standards from November, because I believe that the PCAOB has backed off from that. Is that right?
That was not the quality control standard. That was the two standard, one on firm reporting and one on firm and engagement metrics.
That's what I meant. The firm engagement metrics was the one that I'm interested in. Is that one still proposed? Is that one still happening?
No, both of them were adopted by the board in November, and then it was subsequently withdrawn in February this year.
Got it. So the firm and engagement level metrics would have required firms to report on hours worked by senior professionals compared to junior staff. They would have had to report average weekly hours worked by seniors on a quarterly basis at a firm level, how many training hours per year audit personnel are getting, the experience of audit personnel, their industry experience, and some more metrics as well, like the history of restatements, the retention levels, that sort of thing. You opposed that.
Yes.
That seems like it would be interesting to know on a firm by firm basis how many hours these auditors are being worked, how experienced they are, what the churn rate is at those firms. Why did you oppose that?
Yes. I oppose that for a few reasons. And if you look at all of the metrics, I agree some of them would be helpful, but not all of them. But I oppose for primarily two reasons. One, our economic benefit, the cost benefit, was not compelling. That these metrics in terms of benefit will outweigh the cost, because I don't know if you work in the public accounting environment or not, but if everybody has to be keeping track of their hours on the individual hour they've done. And I remember when I was an auditor, like we would have a spreadsheet to, like, for budget purpose, that will keep track of, by work stream or something like that. And this would mean in order to provide that metrics at the firm level, a firm would have to implement a system to capture them consistently. And it would be tremendously burdensome. And to me, especially if you're already in your busy season, you should focus on doing audit, not tracking all these hours. So to me, our economic analysis was not clear that the benefit outweighs the cost. Secondly, is we claimed that we were doing that for investors and audit committees. But the feedback we got from investor and audit committees through public comments where they did not need this to make their decision. So it wasn't clear that we were doing this truly to meet a need that we said we were trying to meet. So those were the two main reasons. And this is kind of how I make my decision when I look at our the standard, whether it will truly improve audit quality or not. Because to me, that's the most important thing.
Well, and it seems like you can't even make that determination as to whether or not any of these reporting requirements will improve audit quality, because there is no true measure of audit quality at the PCAOB.
Yes. So I think it was an attempt to provide more information so that people can deduce the audit quality. Because I think we point pointed to some of the research on the number of hours you work in some area, but and it, when you think about it, when you do these metrics at the every single issuer level, there's so much context that will that people need to understand to
Yeah.
consume that information in a way that is not misleading. And I don't believe our proposal provided that kind of ability.
Uh, Well,
And the
and if
last thing we want to do is to confuse more people.
you look at how quickly artificial intelligence is coming into audit and accounting, the metric of hours worked is going to become less and less and less relevant to the output of audit quality. Because if artificial intelligence increases the productivity of one person by 10x or more, as is being claimed and as is being experienced by many people, then it won't matter how many hours are being reported. Like, that's not the most important thing.
Yes. And I also I said this because some commenters suggested that we do this on a pilot basis, which I would have supported, because I think in today's environment where technology is moving, we really need a more agile approach, so that to look at something on a pilot, to do something on a pilot basis and then learn from that and adjust, that would have been a more sensible approach so that we could learn more from the pilot. That, but that was not the proposal.
Mm. So the idea behind it was to give more information to investors. One really important piece of information that is not currently given to investors is the name of the company that was audited in these inspection reports. So when an audit is deficient, the PCAOB does not reveal the company that was audited. Do you think that should be revealed, shared with investors?
I I don't know if there's a reason not to. I do know that it requires more public comment, and I don't know if issuers have any concern, audit committee have any concern. I actually am someone who really support more data so that can help people make decisions. So I don't see what the risk would be, but I also don't claim to know all of it. So I would like to hear more
Mhm.
from, different commenters, whether that is something that would be a problem or not. Lawyers might tell me that that is not good. I don't know.
Yeah. I know that I imagine that the audit firms would not be happy to have their clients named if it turns out that they did a deficient audit. That wouldn't be good for their business, and probably not good for them from a legal standpoint either. But I do wonder if it would incentivize audit firms to do higher quality audits because of the fear of the blowback when a client finds that there's a news report now about how their most recent audit had a Part 1A deficiency, and the auditor should not have issued their opinion. I do feel like that would make a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, that I think is a logical approach. But I think, to do that, we probably need to go through some kind of rulemaking in order to do that.
Mm.
I don't know what the history was in terms of where we are now with the fact that we're not disclosing issues.
So we've already talked about this from a theoretical standpoint. This idea of this, deficiency rate versus the restatement rate. And that was at the center of your public dispute with Senators Warren and Whitehouse last year. So we don't have to dig into the your arguments, because we've heard those, and I think, to summarize what Senator Warren and Whitehouse said, it was basically that, like, they. Well, I'd love to hear from you. Like, what was that like? How did it feel having two senators criticize you for a speech you made, and then what inspired you to go public with your response?
I was shocked because I gave the speech to a group of internal auditors. And I had no idea somebody's out there reading my speech, because I'm thinking, who is out there um, reading my speech for no reason? So that was my initial reaction, and I was really shocked because the the senators accused me of lying essentially in my speech, and so when I think about my own background, and obviously I was the first board member to dissent in the history of PCAOB uh, on our first, for the no card proposal. Um, but so I have been, really name as the dissenting member, vocal critic. People have called me contrarian, which I embrace all those titles. So it's fine. But I was very upset about being accused of lying. I think that
Yes.
if you say that, I had a different views, and I thought it was very hypocritical of the senators, especially Senator Warren, to essentially bully me um, because I had a different view from her.
Yeah. She
And
basically
so,
characterized you as the quote is, "You appear to be focused on downplaying and misdirecting attention from these atrocious findings," referring to the latest report on the deficiency rate.
yeah. So I felt that if you want to say my views were not correct, they're not, consistent with what you believe, that's all fine. And I also believe that senators do have the authority to, hold us accountable. And if she had reached out to me and said, I have problem with your speech and these remarks you made, what made you and want to have a conversation, that would be completely appropriate. But to then put in a letter that she sent to our chair, which means I didn't even have a proper avenue to respond, and call my character into question, I could not be silent about it. And I thought about what I would do. And one of the things as a board member of PCAOB, and like I said earlier, because the board members, all the power really to run the organization is vested in the chair, the board members really only have our voice and our vote. So the only if my voice is being taken away, then I should not be in my job anymore. So I decided that I was going to speak up, which was what I did.
And you did in a LinkedIn post, and it received probably far more coverage than the original letter that the senators sent. It was quite remarkable in the accounting profession.
Yes, I was very thankful the support I received. That was one of the things that I realized um just from my especially the past 2 years. I think people were very appreciative that I would speak up. And even though I am a minority on our board, in terms of my views, but I do represent the majority of the stakeholder views, the reasonable investors, the people in the profession. Um, so I've received a lot of support, and I feel like it's important for me to use my voice to speak up for those who don't have a voice.
Well, thank you for lending your voice to this program, and thank you for answering some questions that have been bugging me for years. I really appreciate it.
Welcome. You're welcome. I appreciate having the opportunity to, speak here and talk to you. I have listened to some of your podcasts myself. So thank you for inviting me.
Happy to have you.